Hey, it's Monday, August 26th. What's going on? Well, last week we celebrated the 35th anniversary of Pete Rose being banned from baseball. He was the manager of Cincinnati Reds and he was betting on baseball. I guess that's illegal. Other things is, of course, the DNC had its convention and Kamala closed it off with her speech to the United States. Now we have Trump and Kamala. They're going to be battling it out for our votes. And what about Robert F. Kennedy? Lastly, the Fed seems to be interested in reducing interest rates, so that should be good for our investments, shouldn't it? Anyway, let's get to today's topic. Hey, so in 1956, on this date here, BMC, British Motor Corporation, introduced the Mark I Mini. The situation at that time was the Egyptian president, Nasser, had nationalized the Suez Canal. I don't really know what was going on because I wasn't born then at that time. However, apparently it was causing fuel shortages and rationing in Europe. So this little car really was something that was greatly needed at the time. Now, believe it or not, I had lived in Indonesia in the late 70s, and I remember getting in a car like that. I don't really recall seeing those cars here in the US, but I got in a car like that. The front seat was pushed all the way back. I got in the car, and I felt like Mr. Incredible, this big man, hunched up in this tiny little car. My knees were in my chest. It was a tiny car. So hey, another iconic car, and we all know what that one is, right? The VW Beetle. That was introduced to the United States in 1949. It came into New York. I believe it was considered the cheapest car in Europe at the time. And what it did for Americans is it changed the landscape of car ownership forever. Now Americans felt like a household could become a two-car family. My parents did not buy a Beetle. They bought a Renault. It looked like a Beetle. In fact, my dad had to convince me it wasn't a Beetle. And my mom used that car. She was a school teacher at St. Scholastica in Woodridge, if you know where that's at. And she would drive her three children to school in that car. So that's how we became a two-car household. So we Americans love our cars, don't we? From big SUVs to hot sports cars to minivans to cushy sedans, you know, the cushy cruiser, I think they're called, to now the typical SUV. In fact, I drive a RAV4, which is considered, I believe, the #1 selling SUV, and mine's a hybrid, and I believe that's also the #1 selling hybrid now. Okay, Mark, so what does it have to do with anything? Well, with these cars comes, driving these cars comes a lot of responsibility, whether we realize it or not. And as I said in last week's video, doesn't life just happen? Life just happens. And I'm not talking about the person who wants to go 120 miles an hour down the expressway, who's cutting through traffic, who's running red lights. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the responsible drivers. You other people, you don't belong on the planet. Go someplace else. The responsible driver, life just happens, doesn't it? So what happens if something happens? That's the question. And with that question, what are the solutions? Well, if you're at fault, you can always do option #1. Self-insure, that's right. When you get your job and you move out of your parents' house, you can become a minimalist. Save every single penny you can, so that way when you have a life just happens accident, your savings can pay for it. Woohoo! Congratulations to you. You know what? For most people, that's just flat out not realistic. And you could have a tiny little car who could take out a huge pickup truck. Got a friend who that happened to. You could slip on the ice and take out somebody standing at the bus stop. You can take out somebody running through the streets wildly because the Bulls just won the championship. Actually happened to a client of mine. Life just happens. So the question is, how much automobile insurance is enough? And the law says you have to have it. Yeah, Mark, how much insurance is enough? Well, you know what? You can only really be sued for what you have. So take a look at your net worth. Don't make it rocket science, but get a good idea. Get a 10 minutes worth of effort, pen and paper. Figure out what your net worth is. Add into your income. If you have a minimalistic income, you probably don't have much income to sue for. But if you're high income, you do have an income to sue for. So let's give you an example here. You have a $750,000 net worth. Okay, value of your home, value of your assets, value of your savings, things of this nature. You can only buy automobile insurance, $250 per person, $500 per accident, or you can buy a CSL, combined single limit policy, up to $500,000. But you have a net worth of $750,000. You're falling $250,000 short. Yeah, but Mark, most accidents aren't that expensive. Okay, that's true. But what happens if you injure somebody? They're disabled. What happens if you kill somebody? You know, I had a client who took out 6 cars by accident. So to cover this, you can buy yourself an umbrella. Woo! You know what's more important is having enough liability insurance. So a lot of times I'll recommend to people, let's go with some higher limits of deductible or higher deductibles, because that premium savings can allow you to buy higher limits of liability. And trust me, when you're being sued for something, most people tell you, I don't have enough insurance. So it's better to have higher limits. And these deductibles, if they go to $1,000 to $2,500, yeah, you don't like it. You might be mad at me for recommending it, but you know what? You'll recover from that. If somebody sues you for $500,000, $1 million over it, you can't recover from that. So with all that in mind, what's on the bottom of the screen? Yes, it is my email. It is my phone number. Call me. Call me. I'm more than happy to sit down with you to figure out what's in your best interest, what you can afford, so that way, if something happens, because life happens, you'll still be able to sleep well at night.